Today, we're diving into the world of a soldier's life during the monumental Napoleonic Wars through the pages of The Diary of a Napoleonic Foot Soldier. This is written by a real foot soldier, Jakob Walter. He has been in full retreat from Moscow for weeks. Let's get started. Again and again, people died and sometimes froze to death. These were people who pressed toward the fire but were seldom permitted to get there, so they died away from the fire, and very often they were even converted into cushions in order that the living would not have to sit in the snow. In every bivouac, soldiers who looked like specters crept around at night. The color of their faces, their husky breathing, and their dull muttering were horribly evident, for wherever they went, they remained hopeless, and no one allowed these shades of death to drag themselves to the Ree. Usually 6, 8, or 10 of us had to combine to build a fire, since no other wood was to be had except rafter pieces from burned houses or trees lying around, shattered wagons, etc., and without the cooperation of the men, nothing could be accomplished. Neither did we dare to fall asleep at the fire all at the same time, because no one was safe from stealing and robbery. As we came to Orsha, it was said that we would get shoes and bread from a magazine, also oats for the horses, but this was impossible. In spite of the guards stationed around the storehouses, none of the doors could be opened, since everyone hit and shoved each other in order to get close to a door. I hurried there at first to obtain oats, but that was impossible until the guards could no longer stand their ground and the doors were sprung open. Then I climbed through a window opening, took several sacks of oats with the help of my comrades, and brought them to the campfire. Immediately thereafter, a soldier who also shared in my fire came with 2 loaves of bread. Now everyone's heart beat with eagerness, and everyone sprang toward the bread store. When we arrived, no one could get inside any more, and those within could not come out because of the pressure. What was to be done? Many weak soldiers lay on the floor and were trampled down, screaming frightfully. I made for a window opening again, tore out the shutter, the wooden grating, and the window, and got V of the loaves, though they were trampled and broken. This was since Moscow the second bit of bread, for which I thanked God anew with tears. Now we were all happy by the fire, and with renewed spirits we resumed our journey toward whatever fate had in store for us. Always I set my mind to it, and constantly made my way toward the front of the army rather than to the rear. Very often I had to go back because of the Cossacks roaming about. Then I joined the front of the column again so as not to be cut off from behind. Between Orsha and Kochanova, I again rode off to the side of the army toward a village which stood in flames, in order to warm myself for a short time in the night and to seek for whatever was available. No sooner had I laid down than the Cossacks came and caught whomever of us they could get. My horse had a peculiar intelligence, for as soon as shots were fired, it turned and ran of its own accord with all its strength. In the absence of danger, however, striking it often did no good when I wanted to ride fast. Thus it saved me by flight, and we headed toward the army again. Those on foot who had also made the side march were caught and plundered. The Frenchmen were usually struck down by the Russians and not pardoned. Those who were German could reckon on pardon with certainty because, as it was said, the Russian emperor had commanded that the Germans be spared, since the empress, as is known, was a descendant of the House of Baden. While on my side march, I saw lying on the ground a beautiful black bearskin with head and claws, which fugitives had had to throw away. With cries of hurrah, I took possession of this in the hope of bringing my belongings to Germany, for I had various silver vessels from Moscow which were worth from 300 to 400 florins. Besides this, I had silk goods, muslin, etc., such as I was able to take in abundance from the stalled wagons. Nevertheless, all this came to nothing. The retreat led through Kochanova, Tolotzin, Krupki, Bober, and Lieknitsa to Borisov. In the bustle by day and by night that hardly let me rest or sleep even a few hours in 4 or 5 nights, my horse, which was tied to my arm by a strap, was cut off and led away unnoticed. Since I was always accustomed to pulling on the strap on waking up to see whether my horse was still there, I pulled and this time felt no horse. I jumped up, and now what? I thought to myself, even if I had the whole night to spend looking, only a miracle could lead me to my horse, and the likelihood was all the more uncertain if my horse was already on the march. However, I had to do something. I ran left and right, back and forth, and whenever I tried to run close to a horse, my life was endangered by whipping and beating, for one could not take enough precaution against theft and robbery. Usually one of those sitting by the fire had to keep watch. All at once I saw my horse standing before a chapel door with his strap tied to a soldier who was sleeping inside the doorway. Very softly now, I in my turn cut the strap and returned. I dared not sleep any more, I thought, so that if my horse lover returned, I could speak with him. This night I came by chance upon a comrade. This was the third man from my district whom I met on the way from Smolensk to Moscow and back to this place. An officer also had this man with him as a faithful friend. Indeed, every soldier was like an officer now, since none of the uniforms showed any distinction in rank, and no superior could command a private. Officers were beaten away from the fire just as privates were whenever they tried to press forward without merited claim. Only mutual support still procured true friendship. This aforesaid countryman, whom I had once liked so well, still had some rice from Moscow, though only a handful. Along with this, I had a little piece of meat which I cut off next to the ears from a dog's pelt, with the whole head on it that lay not far from our fire. Just to give the water flavor and to warm our stomachs, we boiled the two together. Now, when it was only half cooked, we started eating, and although the meat already stunk a good deal and there was no salt with it, we devoured everything with the best appetite, feeling ourselves lucky to have for once obtained something warm. Some time before the departure, he said to me, "I had a loaf of bread for my master. You have taken it from me." This was a pain to my feelings, which I can never in my life forget. It is noteworthy how an opinion which is entirely false can turn a friend into a scoundrel and change him into a shameful caricature of a human being on account of a bit of bread. Here I saw truly how low reason had sunk with us. Our brains were frozen, and there was no feeling left. I swore and said, "Comrade, you are wrong. I have not seen or taken any bread. I would rather give you bread than take it." It did no good. He remained firm in his opinion, and death soon found him. Before I came to Borisov, we bivouacked behind a forest around 11 o'clock at night, and it seemed as though the Russians had surrounded us entirely, for the cannonades thundered upon us from all sides, and it was necessary to retreat hurriedly until the enemy gave up from weariness. Everyone among us let loose with slugging, hitting, and chasing, as if we were enemies among ourselves. Every time in bivouac the Germans joined together and made the fires in groups. They were mostly Württemberg sergeants and soldiers who joined with me at the fire, and here each one fried the horse meat which he had cut off laboriously along the way, often with scuffing and slugging, for as soon as a horse plunged and did not get up immediately, men fell upon it in heaps and often cut at it alive from all sides. The meat, unfortunately, was very lean, and the only skin with the little red meat could be wrested away. Each of us stuck his piece on a stick or saber, burned off the hair in the fire, and waited until the outside was burned black. Then the piece was bitten off all around and stuck into the fire again. One seldom had time for boiling, and not one among 20 men had a pot. When the night meal was ended here, we all lay down, and I went to sleep. My horse was tied to my arm, as was my custom. In a short time, one of my sincere comrades cried, "You look after your horse so that it won't be stolen." I said, "It's here all right." I was not awakened again the second time. My countryman cut the strap and sneaked away. Then I woke up to find myself forsaken. God, I thought, who is it that can save me? What is to be done? Mine and my master's possessions I cannot bring any farther. I cannot carry even my fur because of my weakness, and I must freeze to death without it. These thoughts made me despondent, and increasing pain consumed my body. Now I had to risk something, even if my life should be lost. Besides, it was already half gone, I thought. Only about 100 paces away lay the French cuirassier guards, who earlier had forcibly taken my coffee and sugar loaf while in camp. I will risk taking a horse. I crept near the front, observing which of the men did not move and might be sleeping, cut off a strap, and came away with a very large black horse. I went to a place some distance away where no one was about, then ran hurriedly to get my luggage, laid it on, and went on without delay. Indeed, I thought, if only the owner will not see me. Because of this fear, I later traded off the horse. Before daylight, as I rode thoughtfully along, I heard my master again, Major von Schaumburg. I called him by name, whereupon he heartily rejoiced and said, "Now we are together again." He told of his preservation until now, and I also told him of mine. He was particularly glad about my care for his luggage and about my reconquest of a horse. After we came to Borisov, we bivouacked again. We came to a lumber yard and built a fire there. When the major had become somewhat warm, his subjects plagued him with unusual wickedness, and for this reason he asked me to kill the tormentors in his shirt collar. I did it, but when I had his collar open, his raw flesh showed forth where the greedy beasts had gnawed in. I had to turn my eyes away with abhorrence and reassure the master that I saw nothing, telling him that my eyes hurt so much from the smoke that I could not see anything. These pests, however, were no less to be found on me, thousands of them. However, because of my constant restlessness, they could not get to the point of forcing me to treat them with flesh. Besides, I remembered the saying, "Lice stay on healthy people only," and I did not count this a plague in view of the greater one. As I walked about within the court, I saw about 20 dead cows which must have died from hunger and cold. When I tried to cut something off from them with my saber, they were all frozen as hard as a rock, and only with the greatest effort did I finally rip a belly open. Since I could cut or tear nothing loose but the entrails, I took the tallow and supplied myself with a goodly amount of it. Each time I would stick a little of this tallow on my saber and let it get just hot enough in the fire for the greatest part of it to remain unmelted, and I would eat one piece after another with the greatest eagerness. What I had heard before, namely that tallow eating drove sleep away, I now found to be true. For about 14 days I had tallow, which I always ate only in the greatest emergency, and which I thriftily saved. And truly, sleep did not bother me any more. I could always be active then throughout the night, and could forage for myself and my horse in various ways. This concludes the 8th part of the story. Thank you very much for listening. What do you think of Walter's adventures? Please subscribe for more episodes and leave a comment.